Hey guys, quick aside before we start today's video. If you guys are like me, and I would guess a lot of you are, you probably do a lot of writing, whether it be posts on social media, blog posts, or heck, even scripts for videos. And few things are worse than posting something online only to realize that you made a spelling or contextual error. Or in my case, realizing while editing a review together that I wrote in the wrong word into the script and didn't catch it, and it's right in the middle of a sentence so I can't edit around it. To avoid situations like that, it's a good thing that today's video is brought to you by Grammarly, an intelligent writing app. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. Grammarly is a text editor that you can paste your writing into, or you can download their Chrome extension, which automatically checks your spelling on the web on whatever websites you might use. Though be forewarned, it doesn't work on every site, but it works on most. And if you want to use Grammarly and also want to support the channel, wink wink, you can go to this link, getgrammarly.com/BlackScarabFilmZ, and the best part about Grammarly is that it's absolutely free. They do offer a premium service that nets you extra features, but trust me, the free version is more than enough to start, and they aren't like other free services that try to bully you into using the premium version. And if I'm being honest, the fact that they don't do that would make me more likely to get the premium version if I ever wanted it. I've been using it for the past month, and it's been a great help to me. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't believe in the service, and using it has paid off in spades. Trust me, just a few days ago it caught me using the word settling instead of setting, and if I hadn't caught that before filming, I'd have been banging my head while editing. The link again is getgrammarly.com/BlackScarabFilmZ. I hope you try it out, and I hope you enjoy using it as much as I do, and I hope you enjoy the video, which we're going to get to now. Hello and welcome to the Literary Lair. Back in 2013, I started a project that I sadly, up until this point, have never finished. The intent was to go back and redo a lot of my early content because, well, up until about a year or two ago, my videos were sort of absolute crap. And kudos to 2013 me for thinking that he had it in him to revise and produce proper reviews, when I don't even consider my work from back then to be some of my decent content. Or my not-so-terrible content. In doing so, I only ever did one episode and gave up. Not because I didn't feel it worthwhile, but because the second book on the docket, the second book I ever covered on this show, and today's subject, Old Doc Methuselah, is boring as all hell. This book broke me back then, and sent me into a writer's block spiral that lasted an entire month, and forced a costume change. But this past week, I was in another spell of writer's block, and I decided to dust off this old tome, and finally re-review it. Also, I promised a book review last week, but I didn't have anything ready since I've been focusing on coursework and reading a book that I'm going to review later this year. Today's book comes to us from L. Ron Hubbard, author of Battlefield Earth and founder of the Church of Scientology. Come to think of it, the fact that they've never done an adaptation of this book with Tom Cruise in the lead role is sort of a missed opportunity. I could go into a spiel on the history of Hubbard and his writing, but I think it's best to save that for if I ever do Battlefield Earth, since the whole Scientology angle is much more applicable to that book than this one, considering that this book was written before he founded the church. Truth be told, I remember absolutely nothing about this book, except that it was so boring that I barely made it 10 pages into the 50-page story. Might as well have been 500 pages, although I swear I remember having read it all the way through years earlier when I first bought it and liking it. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Is the book really all that bad? Or has my memory conflated the quality of the book with the intense feeling of burnout I was feeling at the time of that attempted re-review? Let's find out. This is Old Doc Methuselah. The cover is actually pretty damn awesome, and is probably why I bought it in the first place. You have this epic figure standing in the center, holding these fluorescent light bulb looking things that are emitting force lightning out of the top, standing on a floating platform, and has on a blue cape with lightning bolts on it, and has a super cool uniform on underneath. And next to him is his faithful alien companion Hippocrates, who is reading The Invader's Plan, the last book published by Hubbard in his lifetime. Neat little detail there. The one thing that worries me is that on the back of the book there are excerpts from reviews, and the one from the New York Daily News just has one bit. A brilliant science fiction author, which is a really weird bit to completely remove from context. Makes me think that the sentence it came from said something like, despite Hubbard being a brilliant science fiction author, this book is super duper goddamn boring. Though I read that paper, so they probably wouldn't have been so vulgar. Let's get to the story itself. So, ostensibly in my original review, I was trying to review every single story in the book, but we're not doing that today because screw that. We'll only be covering the first story, the one bearing the title of the anthology, Old Doc Methuselah. To start, the book's pages are made out of a very nice material, very sturdy, and unlike a lot of paper nowadays that you can accidentally rip if you turn a page too fast, not that that would be a problem for this book, but still, it's almost like a nice cardstock and... yeah, I'm stalling. The story opens up with Old Doc, a soldier of light, a member of an organization that's basically like the Green Lantern Corps, but for doctors, landing on the planet Spico in his spaceship named the Morgue, intending to go fishing. Now, before you get any ideas, the series was published by Hubbard in the 1940s in astounding science fiction under the pen name René Lafayette, roughly 15 or so years before Doctor Who would be conceived of. And yet this book really seems like it's trying to be Doctor Who. So much so that I found a forum post where someone questions whether or not Doctor Who ripped this off, but they never got a straight answer. My theory, that to draw comparisons again with Doctor Who, is that like the Cybermen, it's just parallel evolution. Though it's entirely possible that someone working for the BBC, possibly Sidney Newman himself, had read this and borrowed some ideas. Though the thing is that while it's reminiscent of Doctor Who, a lot of the book doesn't read like a First Doctor story. It reads more like the 4th through 7th Doctor's eras, so it would be pretty crazy if it was inspired, considering that the similarities wouldn't take shape until much later into the show's run. I still think Doctor Who is better, though. As the Doc, is fishing, his alien companion Hippocrates watches him from the morgue and notices a nearby scuffle involving a woman and an Earthman.
Make this brief, Earthman.
He tries to stun both of them to save Doc, but in the delay it takes to decide, Doc enters his firing line. Old Doc uses his fishing pole to disarm the assailant, drugs him into a suggestive state, and makes him believe that he's a stone, before rescuing the girl, having Hippocrates carry her up to the ship. She, having fainted during the encounter, wakes up and tells them that her father was injured in the crash, and Hippocrates goes off to retrieve him, but it's not good. Remember Bill Potts in World Enough in Time? Yeah, like that. Old Doc tells the girl, Miss Elston, that the prognosis isn't good, but he can try his best, and Hippocrates tells her that Doc's duty as a soldier of light is to help people with medical problems. She tells him her plight, that her father is a judge in New York, back on Earth, and was told by a Captain Blanchard that Spico was about to be demolished to make way for a hyperspace bypass. Nah, I'm just kidding. It was going to be settled on by a huge corporation that needed the planet as a stop point for their ships. Blanchard and Judge Elston teamed up to encourage people to settle there, and with the corporation coming in, a lot of business was supposed to be booming. There's just one small problem. Blanchard lied, and because of a new engine design, the corporation doesn't need Spico, and a bunch of people just spent their life savings to move to a planet destined to become a ghost town with no stopovers, like Radiator Springs from Cars. On their ship were documents linking Blanchard to the whole deal, because without it, Blanchard's name doesn't appear anywhere, only Judge Elston's, and he'd be forced to take the blame for the whole debacle and probably lose everything. Blanchard is the one who shot them down and sent the Earthman after her to steal the documents and cover his own ass. She begs for Doc's help, however Hippocrates is quick to remind Doc that it goes against his code of ethics to participate in any political activities. He's just a doctor, nothing else.
Just an old country doctor.
But Miss Elston is hot, and Doc wants to help her regardless. Blanchard burns the document featuring the agreement, and Doc goes into town, pretending to be interested in buying up some land, and gets close to Blanchard, learning about the intricacies of the situation, and seeing the squalor that the commoners are living in. He won't stand for it, despite Hippocrates and his constant urging to follow his oath. And that's the story. Doc versus Blanchard. Doc being a champion of the downtrodden, fighting against an oppressive business magnate, and making a difference where he can with the people around him, with the help of a pretty human woman and his inhuman assistant who refers to him as Master and... Jesus Christ, this really does sound a lot like Doctor Who. During the story, Doc dumps something into the town's reservoirs and blocks Blanchard's attempts to flee town by using his powers as a soldier of light to mark all the getaway pilots as sick so they won't dare flee because the tag of a soldier of light is law. Because of this, Blanchard and his goons kidnap Miss Elston and try to drown her in a river. Blanchard sees a mob growing near the morgue and fakes his death, disintegrating his assistant and dropping his ID tag into it. Then he decides that he'll just steal the morgue, since the ship itself carries the weight of a soldier of light, so he could go around doing as he pleases with limited repercussions. Before he can, though, Doc confronts him. There's a firefight, and the people of Junction City await the victor with bated breath. And it turns out to be Doc, who is pretty beat up and calls for Hippocrates, but he doesn't show, since the earlier issues they had regarding Doc's ethics led him to believe that Doc didn't need him around, so he went to go mope. He tells them that their money is safe and locks himself in his ship and warns the people to empty the reservoir. The people once again wait for Doc to return, and after a significantly longer time where his ship starts making all sorts of strange noises, he does, with Judge Elston in tow, presumably using bits from Blanchard's corpse to repair Elston, as Doc had earlier referred to requiring an entirely new body to repair the damage. Ew. Elston informs everyone that he has their money, and he'll either fold it in the public works, or they can have it back, provided they have the proper receipts. Hippocrates returns with Miss Elston in tow, having been moping by the river during the attempted drowning, and he killed the goons responsible. Because of all the chaos, someone had called System Patrol, and Hippocrates worries that if they find out about Doc's dealings, they'll arrest him for breaking the code. But Doc is unconcerned, and Miss Elston is rather unnerved by something. When the System Patrol officers arrive, they ask Doc what the hell happened, and he tells them that he heard something about a riot, but nothing crazy. And when Hippocrates asks the townspeople, they say that Blanchard ran off when Judge Elston returned, and wasn't killed. Hippocrates then pieces together Doc's machinations. The stuff he dumped in the reservoir was a powder neuralizer. It erased or rewrote everyone's memories so that no one remembers Doc doing anything, and only vaguely knows what transpired that night in any capacity. The only ones in on it are Doc, Hippocrates, and the Elstons, who promise not to tell. Hippocrates is slightly annoyed with his master for not being clued in on the plan earlier, since he had spent hours worrying about Doc's well-being, but he's just relieved that Doc is safe. The story ends with Doc setting course for another adventure, while Hippocrates comes across the piece of paper that so unnerved Miss Elston. Doc's medical degree, from Johns Hopkins University, issued on Earth in the year 1946. 700 years before this story takes place, which doesn't faze Hippocrates at all. Old Doc is a bit of a chauvinist and a horn dog, focusing on how hot Miss Elston is instead of his duties as a soldier of light. And it's not even like he helps her for some altruistic reason above his physician's code, because it's the right thing to do. All the narrator talks about is her hair. Side note, is a hair fetish a thing? Because that's sort of bizarre. And yeah, I mean, I guess it becomes altruism because he doesn't do anything with Miss Elston, but still, there's a lot of talk about her appearance from Doc's perspective, and it's more than just establishing what she looks like. Old Doc also acts all swashbuckly like the Doctor. When Miss Elston asks what they're gonna do, he immediately springs into action like the Doctor would. Probably why I envision him looking like William Hartnell, even if he's said to be centuries old, but appears to be in his 30s like the 5th or 10th Doctors. He's a smart character and makes for a good main character because he does, after seeing the squalor of the town, do his best to help all the little people around him. He's a good person, and despite bucking his responsibilities as a soldier of light, he lives up to his medical degree. Hippocrates is interesting yet undeveloped. We probably learn more about him in the later stories, I can't really remember, but he's got a near photographic memory, able to recite the Soldier of Light Code of Ethics like Crichton doing the Space Corps directives. Plus, that bit where he descends into sadness because he thinks Doc hates him is a really well-written and nuanced part of the story, made even better when it's revealed the entire thing was a ploy. Though, I don't know why Doc had to deceive Hippocrates. I mean, good thing he did, because if he wasn't wallowing, Miss Elston would be dead. But it's a bizarre thing to leave him out on, especially since he could have blown it if he didn't figure out the ploy. Miss Elston is a generic damsel in distress. She's around to be hot, exposit the plot details to Doc, and then get captured to give a dramatic finale. Other than that, she's not really interesting to me. Blanchard is a decent villain, sort of stock, but also sort of like the Collector from the Sunmakers, being in it from the money. Although I guess since he was entirely greedy, it's probably more apt to say he's a cross between Boss Hogg from the Dukes of Hazzard and Gatherer Haid from the aforementioned serial. A greedy dude whose dialogue I subconsciously read in a southern accent. The other minor characters, Judge Elston, Blanchard's Martian assistant, Dart, are all interesting, but didn't really leave any lasting impact on me. Overall, apart from Old Doc, no one's really developed, probably because they're only going to appear in this one story. But for Doc and Hippocrates, they're developed decently, although I wish we learned more about Hippocrates. While I won't deny that my emotional state back in 2014 may have contributed to my dislike of it upon that reread, the fact that I remembered nothing of the book in its entirety tells of an unremarkable story, and I stand by my assertion that the book is boring. There are huge chunks of the book that are just blocks of text from the Soldier of Light rulebook, or passages of character history or description, and it's just so damn dense. It is a veritable slog to get through. And it's not like dense in the way that Moby Dick was, because it was old and was written in a practically different language. This is just dense sci-fi jargon. And as the master of reading dense sci-fi jargon, even I was bored by it. In contrast, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is equally, if not more so, exposition-heavy, yet Adams manages to make it interesting and page-turning in a way that Hubbard just can't. The pacing is also sort of slow, and to be honest, it takes about 20 pages of a 50-page story to really get going and get interesting. I hadn't actually gotten that far during my last reread, so that gives a decent indication of pacing, that I enjoyed it purely because I forced myself to push through more than I got last time through the boring part to get to the fun part. But once it gets to the fun part, it did maintain my interest, so if you can get through the first 20 pages without falling asleep, then the plot progresses pretty well. I wouldn't say that it's rushed at all either. If anything, some parts take way too long to get going. Old Doc Methuselah. Is it bad? I can't say that it's bad because, well, that would mean calling Doctor Who bad, because this legitimately reads like a Doctor Who episode. Not a very good one, but a decent one. I loved it when I first read it, years before becoming a reviewer. Hated it upon a reread, and now I'm just sort of indifferent to it. It's not great, but it's not the worst sci-fi story ever. It's slow, dense, and I can't understand how Hubbard got a religion off the ground, because if it's anything like this, I doubt I'd make it 3 pages in the Dianetics. Probably for the best, though. Still, it's got a heck of a cover, and I only paid $1 for it when I bought it at this weird outlet store that I'm not entirely sure actually existed. If you're a fan of Hubbard's writing, which I am decidedly not, this might be a fun anthology to pick up. If dense sci-fi jargon with weird asides and the fake poetry isn't your thing, then I'd skip this. Though if you are a Doctor Who fan, it's worth it to track it down to check out all the similarities. I don't regret reading it, but it'll probably be a while before I drag this thing out again of my own volition. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more of the Literary Lair, and if you have any comments or complaints about the video, you can put those in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, show it to your friends and share it around the internet. And maybe consider supporting the show on Patreon. Speaking of Patreon, next week we're back to Patreon-sponsored reviews with a movie based on a poem. That's a new one. See you next time.